Another key deciding point for voters will be the abortion issue. This week, both Arizona and Missouri officially added pro-abortion initiatives to the ballot. Turnout for those measures could also spike voting in presidential and congressional races. Voters in both states will decide whether to guarantee what is called a right to abortion with a constitutional amendment. Missouri currently protects life throughout all 9 months of pregnancy, and Arizona allows abortion through the first 15 weeks. Both amendments would allow abortion until viability, around 24 weeks of gestation. In a notable development, Arizona's Supreme Court ruled on Wednesday that informational pamphlets for voters can refer to unborn human beings rather than use the term fetus. Missouri and Arizona join 6 other states in voting on abortion this coming election. Those states shown here in yellow are Nevada, South Dakota, New York, Maryland, Florida, and Colorado. Since the overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022, pro-life advocates have seen ballot losses for life in 6 states, shown here in red. To help unpack this latest on these ballot initiatives, we're joined by someone who has studied and written about abortion law and policy for decades. Elizabeth Kirk serves as Assistant Professor of Law and Co-Director of the Center for Law and the Human Person at the Catholic University of America, Columbus School of Law. Elizabeth, welcome. First things first, does having an abortion amendment in the state constitution ultimately make it harder for voters to pass strong pro-life laws in the future if they were to decide to do so?
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me to discuss this important question. Absolutely, these amendments make it difficult for citizens to pass really any restrictions or regulations on abortion. But I would say they have a twofold significant legal effect. One is to create the conditions under which it's likely that any existing laws would be struck down. So many of these states that are considering abortion amendments have existing sometimes quite moderate laws with respect to abortion, whether they're, accounting for a parental role, informed consent, restrictions on public funding. And we know in states that adopt a state constitutional right to abortion that those get struck down. And then the next, significant impact is, as you say, that there's a chilling effect on future abortion regulation.
That is so important to know. And Elizabeth, we have seen abortion amendments pass in state after state since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Do you think voters even know exactly what they are voting for, or are these amendments intentionally worded to be confusing, in your opinion?
It's very discouraging. I'll admit that. I think whether they're intended to be confusing, the reality is that they are confusing. As you mentioned, we lost 4 of these since Dobbs. We also lost 2 amendments in Kansas and Kentucky that would have just made the constitutions neutral with respect to abortion. And we have 8 on the ballot this year, and none of them are a sure thing. I think the language is confusing for a couple of reasons. One, it's legal language, and so that's not always accessible, to most voters. And then also it's intending to capture a very, difficult legal question, right? All of the nuances, all of the hard cases and things like that. And so the language doesn't easily capture that. And so what happens, whether or not it's actually intended to be confusing, is that the abortion industry exploits that confusion, that natural language confusion, to their advantage. They frame these amendments as sort of moderate, right? Just protecting autonomy. They use rhetoric like restoring Roe, and they scare voters that the alternative, if these aren't passed, is that women are going to go to jail for having a miscarriage, or contraception will be banned, or things like that. And so voters think they have this very difficult decision, and when faced with that difficult decision, they tend to vote for abortion access. What they don't realize is that these amendments protect unlimited, unregulated access to abortion throughout pregnancy at taxpayer expense. And that's not something most Americans support.
Right. And that goes obviously beyond what Roe allowed. Elizabeth, what impact do these abortion amendments have on the number of U.S. abortions? The abortion rate has gone up since Dobbs.
Yeah, I mean, the case I always like to give is Kansas, because Kansas is in the heartland. A lot of people think of it as a relatively moderate state. And in that state, when its state court adopted a natural right to abortion, abortions in that state went from under 7,000 to this year, they're going to be nearly 20,000 abortions in just a few years. Before that state Supreme Court decision, there were 4 abortion clinics in the state. I saw news reports that a 7th is being added this year. So it's an abortion destination state. So we see what the impact of these amendments is explosive growth in the number of abortions.
I have less than a minute with you now, Elizabeth, but I did want to ask, proponents of these abortion amendments in Missouri and Arizona say it allows for abortions up until fetal viability. Is there even a legal definition of fetal viability?
So fetal viability is ordinarily understood to be the time when a child can survive outside the womb, and those provisions do purport to limit abortion after viability. The problem is that those amendments are extremely vague. They leave the question of whether the child is viable up to the discretion of the abortionist, first of all. Second of all, they contain exceptions for the woman's mental health, which, as we know from other cases in other states, is an exception that really swallows the rule. So again, that's another example of political rhetoric, a reasonable limit at viability being used to mask the reality.
Elizabeth Kirk, so grateful for your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Sure, thank you.